A story worthy of a novelist's pen unfolds before us, full of the mysteries of the human soul and unexpected twists. He was always the one to take the initiative, listening attentively to every word, appearing at the right moment, whether it was deep night or bright day. His emotional openness was boundless, and his willingness to give himself was inexhaustible. He kept in mind the smallest details: birthdays, memorable events, and moments of emotional crisis. He answered calls instantly, canceled plans without hesitation, stayed up late, striving to support loved ones. He created the feeling that each of them was the center of his universe. But then the inexplicable happened. He disappeared. Not suddenly and dramatically, but gradually, almost imperceptibly. People stopped asking about his affairs, messages went unanswered, and people moved on. Not feeling anger, but rather apathy. His warmth did not repel, and his consistency did not frighten. It was his ready availability, his seeming invisibility, that made him forgettable. As Carl Jung argued, this was not simply emotional rejection, but a collapse of psychic energy, a kind of death of individuality. When energy is constantly directed outward, when a person never retreats, does not pause, does not protect their inner self, they begin to dissolve into the surrounding world. Not because they are insufficient, but because they are too much, too often, and too easily accessible. And for the human psyche, what is always available eventually ceases to exist, loses its value. The question remains, could this tragic outcome have been avoided, and what lies behind this pattern of human relationships? In an era of universal digital connection, when the world seems entangled in invisible threads of the internet, and instant availability has become the norm, the phenomenon of devaluing emotional openness paradoxically arises. In other words, the more a person is willing to share their feelings and time, the less they are valued in modern society. A friend who unfailingly agrees to all suggestions, a partner who initiates every communication, or an employee who forgets about rest often encounters not gratitude, but the fact that they are taken for granted. Modern relationships, whether romantic, friendly, or professional, have turned into complex psychological games. On the one hand, people declare a need for the loyalty, reliability, and constant presence of loved ones. On the other hand, they subconsciously strive for distance and mystery, elevating inaccessibility to a cult. A person falls into a trap, believing that by sacrificing their time, attention, and empathy, they strengthen the connection with those around them. However, instead of the expected rapprochement, a paradoxical effect occurs. They become invisible. According to the eminent psychologist Carl Jung, the root of the problem lies in a powerful force that surpasses charm and individuality: psychic energy. This energy, which is the life force that nourishes thoughts, feelings, and a person's very presence, is depleted by constant outpouring in conversations, conflicts, and attempts to comfort others. As a result, not only emotional burnout occurs, but also the destruction of a sense of one's own identity. The collapse of the modern personality often proceeds imperceptibly, like a slow fading. It manifests itself in a feeling of emptiness, in endless reflections, in a sense of isolation even when surrounded by people. A person seemingly follows all the rules, but gradually loses touch with reality and feels unneeded. Carl Jung, a distinguished Swiss psychiatrist, believed that the way out of this state lies not in bitterness and resentment, but in the process of individuation. This means returning to oneself, redirecting one's psychic energy, uniting the various aspects of one's personality into a single whole. It is not about being constantly available to others, but about finding a solid foundation within oneself. In a world where everyone strives for more and more, the most attractive influence is exerted by those who know how to step back in time. Jung viewed the mind not as a simple mechanism for logical operations and information storage, but as a complex living system, fueled by a mysterious and invisible energy, which he called psychic. This energy is neither electricity nor adrenaline. It is something deeper and more personal. Psychic energy is the source of our attention, emotions, imagination, and life force. It animates us, allows us to feel deeply, think clearly, find meaning in what is happening, and establish connection with the world around us. However, there is a critical nuance. The supply of this energy is not limitless. Like funds in a bank account, the charge level of a mobile device's battery, or the supply of oxygen in a confined space, psychic energy tends to run out, especially when it is irrationally spent. Every affirmative word spoken when your inner voice suggests denial, every phone check in vain hope of approval, every excessive rumination over the content of a message, a fleeting glance, or a prolonged silence. All of this leads to the leakage of valuable energy. And if these resources are not replenished in a timely manner, the individual risks facing emotional bankruptcy. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung argued that psychic energy circulates in two directions: outward, directed towards interaction with people, and distraction from internal processes, and inward, stimulating self-analysis and personal growth. Modern lifestyle, unfortunately, is structured in such a way as to constantly involve the individual in the external flow. Endless notifications, social networks, and the need for constant connection all relentlessly demand attention. The desire to please others, codependency, and fear of rejection also lead to the depletion of emotional strength. Even maintaining a show of politeness, when not underpinned by sincerity, is a significant source of energy loss. Ultimately, a person gives away their most valuable inner resource to those who do not deserve it. Soulless platforms that feel nothing and habits that leave behind a sense of emptiness. Imagine your psychic energy as a sacred flame, requiring careful handling. If you allow it to dissipate mindlessly, this flame will go out, leaving only ashes. However, if you protect it, it can illuminate all spheres of your life. That is why some individuals, upon entering a space, instantly transform its atmosphere. They carry a cluster of concentrated energy, not wasted on fruitless attempts to please others. On the contrary, they have directed their life force inward, and now it radiates outward, like a beacon. It is sad to realize that most people are not even aware of how their energy is slipping through their fingers. A friend always ready to listen to other people's problems risks turning into an emotional dump. A lover who constantly sends messages becomes no more than background noise. An employee who cannot say no turns into an office doormat. Such people cease to be perceived as strong individuals, seen only as safe, predictable, and frankly, boring companions. Psychic energy given away without limit or discernment does not inspire admiration and love, but only breeds apathy and indifference. Carl Jung, the insightful psychologist, warned, "When a person loses control over the direction of their energy, they lose control over their own personality. To regain presence of mind, inner strength, and self-respect, it is necessary to learn to protect your energy as if it were life itself, and in a sense, it is. Human nature is such that it is irresistibly drawn to what is out of reach. At first glance, it seems that people strive for love, stability, care, and emotional warmth. However, the true picture is somewhat more complex. In reality, the greatest interest, magnetism, and even a certain dependence are caused by uncertainty. Modern neurobiological research confirms this fact. The release of dopamine in the brain occurs not at the moment of receiving the desired, but in the process of anticipating it. It is not the kiss itself that is important, but the anticipation of the possibility of that kiss. When a person displays detachment or their attachment becomes inconsistent, it does not cause boredom in the brain, but, on the contrary, leads to obsession. The reason lies in the fact that uncertainty is addictive, as it activates the same reward centers in the brain as gambling. Waiting for a reply to a message turns into a slot machine game. Will they reply today or not? Each delay in response is perceived as a spin of the roulette wheel. And when finally the long-awaited attention is received, a person experiences a surge of vital energy. However, this feeling is fleeting. The brain quickly adapts to constancy, and what is always present becomes a familiar background. That is why people stop noticing the ticking of a clock, the hum of a refrigerator, or a partner who is always there. Paradoxically, Universal availability deprives an object of desirability, while scarcity only fuels the flames of desire. A person is wired in such a way that their gaze is directed not at what is already in their hands, but at what they are not sure they can hold on to. This manifests itself as scarcity bias, a tendency to place greater value on what is rare, limited in quantity, or difficult to obtain. This mechanism is rooted in the distant past, when food was a scarce resource and high social status meant survival. In modern society, people who demonstrate emotional distance often wield greater power, and it is not because of their superiority, but because of their scarcity. Detachment serves as a signal of social value, as if saying, I don't need to prove my worth, I'm not chasing, I'm being chased. Therefore, when a person is constantly accessible and emotionally, digitally, energetically, they inadvertently transmit the opposite message. I'm always here because I have nowhere else to go. I respond instantly because I have no one else to talk to. Even if this is far from the truth, such a perception is detrimental to magnetism. A dangerous paradox arises. The more effort a person puts in, the less they are valued. Conversely, the less they try, the more others seek their attention. This principle applies not only to romantic relationships, but also to many other areas of life. An artist whose work is not recognized during their lifetime becomes a legend after death. A job that is extremely difficult to get seems more prestigious. A friend who is constantly busy is perceived as a more important person. So what should we do, armed with this understanding? It's not about engaging in behind-the-scenes intrigues or skillfully manipulating those around us. Rather, it's time to stop wasting precious energy on those who cannot appreciate its true value. For the truth is that love that requires the abandonment of one's own self is not genuine. Respect that has to be begged for loses its essence. The great psychologist Carl Jung warned us against excessive self-sacrifice because in doing so, we risk losing the very spark that creates a real connection, an element of mystery and the unknown. We extol kindness, often idealizing it as something absolutely pure, selfless, noble, and almost divine. But what if some expressions of kindness are dictated not by love, but by deep-seated fear? What if our desire to always say yes, to be constantly available, and to put the interests of others above our own is not a manifestation of generosity, but a form of self-denial? Carl Jung called this the shadow, the collection of dark sides of our personality that we carefully hide, suppress, or deny, fearing to appear unacceptable to society. This can be anger that we hypocritically deny, needs that we silence to appear easy to get along with, or boundaries that we never set for fear of being rejected. For many people, showing kindness becomes a kind of mask, a tool for winning the sympathy of others, or at least for avoiding rejection. It is worth pondering this phenomenon. Where exactly did a person learn that helping others guarantees their safety and acceptance? Who instilled in them that expressing their own needs and desires can alienate those around them? Often, the roots of such behavior go deep to childhood experiences, interactions with unpredictable parents or caregivers, to moments of emotional neglect. At some point in life, a person learns a cruel rule. If I always behave well and compliantly, I won't be abandoned. Thus, a stable pattern of behavior is formed, where the individual becomes a fixer, a person constantly solving other people's problems, an empath, deeply feeling the pain of others, and someone who never expresses dissatisfaction. However, behind this mask of a constant smile, a process of self-destruction begins. After all, the constant desire to please others is not maintaining harmony, but a quiet, yet destructive war against one's own personality. Herein lies a psychological paradox that many overlook. Kindness can become a means of control. Continuously giving, a person deep down hopes that they will be needed, that their efforts will be appreciated, that they will be noticed and recognized. This is a kind of deal, veiled as virtue. The thought arises, if I am constantly there and useful, maybe they will stay with me. If I love them strongly enough, maybe they will reciprocate. But love that needs to be earned through excessive self-sacrifice ceases to be true love. It is rather a matter of survival, an attempt to secure a place in the lives of other people. In the depths of the human psyche lies a danger that Jung insightfully foresaw, the dark side of excessive kindness. When the desire to be perfect becomes all-consuming, a person buries their true essence. They say yes while their heart screams no. They give a smile when their strength is exhausted. They comfort others while their own soul is wounded. Thus, gradually and imperceptibly, the personality dissolves, turning into a faceless background in the lives of those around them. Always there, always useful, but invisible. However, it should be realized that unlimited kindness is not a manifestation of compassion, but rather a path to self-destruction. True kindness lies in respecting both others and oneself. It is important not to strive to please, but to strive to be sincere. Jung argued that to achieve wholeness, one must confront their shadow. Look into the face of the parts of themselves that they have rejected and accept them back. This is not a call to cruelty or indifference, but a way to stop disappearing to please others. After all, the most attractive personalities are not those who give without reserve, but those who share from a state of inner truth, not from fear. There comes a moment, quiet and devastating, when a person realizes that they have built their personality around the need to be needed, not known. They were always there, always giving, always kind, and yet people drifted away. Not because they were not valuable, but because they themselves never valued themselves. Carl Jung believed that the path to psychological wholeness, to the process of individuation, is not about becoming someone else, but about becoming oneself. Not the version that plays a role, not the version that seeks to please, but the version that exists, regardless of whether anyone is watching or not. Individuation is a profound process of integrating all aspects of the personality that were previously rejected. This includes accepting anger that seemed disproportionately strong, acknowledging desires that were mistakenly considered selfish, and setting boundaries that may have been called rude. The goal of this process is not to achieve perfection, but to attain authenticity. When a person only shows kindness, is always ready to help, and agrees with everything, they do not feel whole. They become only a part of themselves, a shadow of their potential. Carl Jung argued that true strength arises when a person reclaims the qualities they once rejected. This implies the courage to say what they previously dared not utter. I don't want to do this. I need time for myself. This doesn't suit me. Of course, this path involves the risk of facing discomfort and perhaps even rejection. However, it also opens up new opportunities, in particular, gaining visibility. When a person sets boundaries, those around them begin to notice. When they say no, instead of automatically saying yes, people are forced to stop and think. Thus, a clear picture of the personality is formed, a certain form appears. In a world that constantly seeks to subdue, the ability to remain true to one's truth becomes an attractive force. Think about the images of those personalities who evoke genuine admiration, those whose appearance can transform the atmosphere around them. Notice that they are distinguished not by obtrusiveness or constant availability, but rather by inner stability and deep rootedness in themselves. This is the paradox. The ability to refuse to say no gives much greater power to your yes. Temporary absence sometimes makes your presence truly unforgettable. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of preserving mental energy. It is important to realize that our emotional, mental, and spiritual resources are not limitless. They are like valuable currency, and managing them wisely greatly increases our own value, not only in the eyes of others, but also in our own perception. In everyday life, individuation manifests itself in various forms. Choosing rest instead of being overloaded with obligations, boldly expressing one's truth even if the voice trembles with excitement. It also means giving others the opportunity to cope with difficulties on their own without constantly trying to save them. It means creating moments of silence, allowing you to observe growth and development within yourself. It's about abandoning the pursuit of imposed perfection and immersing yourself in the exciting, authentic experience of self-discovery. And here's the hidden reward. When you stop trying to please everyone, you begin to be noticed by the very people who are truly important to you. After all, the energetic presence that is felt even after you leave does not arise from constantly being in sight, but from a deep knowledge of yourself. The ability to protect your inner fire and appear in the right place with a specific intention, not just out of a sense of duty. In an era when digital technology has created the illusion of constant availability, those who skillfully use the art of strategic absence achieve true memorability. They are not in a hurry with answers, do not waste themselves on meaningless yeses in order to maintain a fragile peace. They know how to disappear, but not for manipulation, but to regain strength, rethink values, and return with something truly valuable, and not just with a desire to prove their significance. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, taught not how to win universal love, but how to achieve wholeness. When a person is whole, they stop desperately needing attention because their presence becomes a self-sufficient statement. Lena was just such a person, someone you could always rely on. Friends needed a ride. She was always ready to give one. The guy had a tough day. She was dropping everything. The boss asked her to stay late. She agreed with a smile. She wasn't just helpful. She was so reliable that she became practically invisible. At first, people admired her, showering her with compliments. "You're so caring. You're always there. You're not like everyone else." Lena wore these words of praise like medals of honor, feeling noticed and special. But gradually something changed. Her messages went unanswered. Plans were canceled. Her name disappeared from group chats, invitations, and the thoughts of those around her. She didn't understand what was happening. She hadn't changed. She continued to show up, give, and sacrifice herself. And yet, she went unnoticed. The silence around her wasn't deafening. It was more surgically precise, unspoken, but no less painful. One night, after a torturous 2-hour wait for a friend who never showed, Lena was overcome not by a flood of tears, but by a chilling numbness that gripped her like a winter frost. Staring into her reflection, she asked herself a question full of bitterness. Why does my existence only have meaning when I'm useful to others? This question became the starting point for a journey she had never suspected. Books, therapy sessions, diary pages filled with unspoken anger and buried dreams, and finally, an introduction to the works of Carl Jung. Reading about psychic energy, she felt like she had finally received a long-awaited diagnosis. Her emotional resources had been depleted by years of immoderate self-sacrifice. She discovered the concept of the shadow, those aspects of her personality that she hid, striving to earn the love of those around her. Her anger, her needs, her right to her own voice. For the first time, Lena realized that her kindness was dictated not by a sincere desire, but by fear. Fear of being forgotten, of being unnecessary. And she compensated for this fear with her constant presence, unwavering attention, and boundless availability. However, Jung offered her a different path, individuation, which meant not striving to become better, but achieving wholeness. It all started small. She stopped responding to messages instantly, learned to say no without accompanying the refusal with lengthy apologies, and preferred an evening alone with her thoughts to a noisy party. At the beginning of this path of change, it felt like a catastrophe. The eyes of those around her couldn't help but notice the changes that had occurred, and some, feeling discomfort, chose to distance themselves. However, soon amazing things began to happen. Others, driven not by a sense of duty, but by genuine interest, began to approach. Their voices sounded with sincere concern. "Are you okay? You seem to radiate something new, something stronger." Lena didn't turn into an extrovert. On the contrary, she gained inner stability. Instead of scattering energy in empty conversations, she turned her gaze inward, listening to her true desires and needs, realizing that she was no longer willing to compromise. Becoming less available, she paradoxically acquired a magnetic attraction. Those same people who hadn't noticed her before were now drawn to her, but not because of a change in hairstyle or the way she laughed, but because Lena had stopped giving herself away completely. She realized that love without boundaries is not a true feeling, but just a performance, a mask hiding fear. Attention bought at the cost of self-denial is not worth holding on to. Lena didn't become cold and insensitive. She simply learned to be selective. She still gave, but she did it consciously with intention, loving from the fullness of her heart. Her presence, once predictable and unnoticed, now became tangible and powerful. When she appeared, people felt it, because Lena had reclaimed her energy, restored her boundaries, and found herself. She didn't disappear. On the contrary, she finally manifested in all her glory. In the unbridled pursuit of universal love and recognition lies a paradoxical phenomenon that escapes our attention. The more we dissolve into availability, the more invisible we become to those around us. Society tells us that being unfailingly helpful and always ready to lend a hand is a virtue. But constant availability devalues our presence, turning it into a familiar background noise. At the same time, it's not the kindness itself that's ignored, but the inexhaustible source of energy that we squander that's taken for granted. Long before the emergence of modern concepts such as burnout and emotional labor, Carl Jung recognized this pattern. He argued that each person possesses a certain reservoir of psychic energy, emotional fuel, life force, attention. Thoughtless squandering of this energy not only depletes us, but also leads to self-destruction. Think of the most charismatic people you've ever met. They weren't tied to constant correspondence, and they weren't quick to agree to every request. Their magnetism wasn't about excessive effort, but about safeguarding their inner world. They practiced a strategy rare in modern society: conscious absence. They didn't try to be everywhere at once, so their appearance was always significant and memorable. Carl Gustav Jung called this process individuation, meaning the ascent to the integrity of the personality. This isn't about living life to earn approval, but about existence stemming from the depths of self-knowledge, inner harmony, and unwavering fortitude. In this regard, it's necessary to look at your life with utmost honesty and identify those areas where vital energy is leaking. Who's the person constantly trying to save? Whose shortcomings are they trying to fix? Or whom are they vainly trying to impress, sacrificing their own essence in the process? The truth is that genuine visibility is achieved not by multiplying efforts, but by revealing one's true nature. It's the ability to give weight to your yes, backing it up with the willingness to say a firm no. It's about being present in the moment, not playing a pre-rehearsed role, about actions dictated by conscious intention, not fleeting impulse. It's necessary to protect your energy not out of selfish motives, but out of a deep sense of self-respect. After all, those who truly value a person would never want them to dissolve to please others' expectations, just to earn their favor. They recognize a person when they appear in all their fullness and uncompromising nature, not as a perpetual helper and savior. If you've ever felt that kindness and responsiveness go unnoticed, remember that this isn't a manifestation of a lack of love, but rather a mismatch of energy flows. The world isn't always inclined to reward mere presence. It prefers strength. And psychic energy is that very strength. The more generously a person squanders it without conscious intention, the more invisible they become to others. But now, with this knowledge, they can reclaim their energy and direct it towards creating their own integral personality.